Hello and welcome everybody to this Vegan FTA live panel. As a movement committed to the liberation of animals, animal farmers are often regarded with disgust and despise for the acts of cruelty that are commonplace within the animal agricultural industry. I can't blame people for being angry, upset, and horrified by these actions. There's no one who shouldn't be shaken by what has been done to our fellow sentient beings. But if we wish to end animal-based agriculture, we have to work with those within the system. While it may seem counterintuitive to some, the animals' liberation lies in the liberation of farmers. Today's goal is to educate you, our viewers, on the importance of these farm transition projects and how you can be your best advocate self by communicating with farmers effectively and helping to build a new food system and economy without animals. So I'd like to thank all of our guests for joining us today. And if we go around and have them introduce themselves. So I'll start with Rebecca.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rebecca Knowles. I'm the founding director of Stock Free Farming, and I'm based in Scotland in the United Kingdom.
And next, let's head over to Emma. Sorry, our Alexa's now introducing herself.
Alexa, we don't need you to introduce yourself. Oh, don't you just love that?
I'll just mute myself. And Emma, if you would love to introduce yourself.
Such a pleasure to meet Alexa as well. But hi, everyone. I'm Emma Stein, the Sustainability Manager at Miyoko's Creamery, and I also oversee the Dairy Farm Transition Program. And Miyoko's Creamery is a vegan cheese and butter company based in the United States.
And last but not least, TJ.
Yes, so I'm TJ Bradford. I'm the Farm Transitions Program Director for Animal Outlook.
Well, it's so wonderful to have you all with us, and I can't wait to learn from all your expertise, and hopefully our audience will enjoy as much as we have learned about your organizations. So.
Absolutely. And now Alexa has left the room, bless her.
Through the window.
Let's start our discussion by sharing some recent news. A qualitative survey of Scottish farmers and crofters was conducted by Stock Free Farming from 2021 to 2022. A key finding from this report was the high percentage of farmers being open and willing to change, with some even expressing an interest in moving away from livestock farming entirely. This comes as a stark contrast to the rhetoric of farming unions and press. I'd like to invite Rebecca. Could you speak on these findings from that survey, and what is it that's currently keeping farmers from making the switch?
Yeah, thanks, Jackie, for your question, and shut me up if I ramble on too long. But we really wanted to know, we did the survey because we wanted to know, do farmers really have an inseverable attachment to farming livestock, or might they be open and willing to change? So we went out on the farms. We didn't wait for farmers to come to us. This was an on-farm qualitative survey. It was randomized. So it was basically cold calling, going up and knocking on the door of the farmhouse and saying, do you have 20 minutes? And we'll pay you a tenner, £10, to do our survey. And that's how it happened. The survey, to let you know the format, it was in 3 parts. So we had a pre-video questionnaire, which asked farmers about their farm, about themselves. Then we showed a 10-minute video. This was a 10-minute informational video. And I think this was a key part of the survey because the video presented the challenges that farmers are going through right now and that farming's going through right now. So challenges from being utterly dependent on the subsidy system in this country, and that is really uncertain going forward with our departure from the EU. Also, the climate change mitigation and the pressure to reduce farm emissions. And then we looked at changing consumer preferences in the direction of plant-based diets. And we also looked at, new biotechnologies and processes that are now replacing meat and animal products more and more. So these were the challenges that were on the video. And then we presented these opportunities to thrive beyond these challenges. And the video highlighted examples of farmers and crofters who are actually doing these things. So some of the stats that came out, we asked the question, would you be willing to change your farming practice if it would help to mitigate climate change? And 86% of farmers and crofters said yes or maybe to that question. Another biggie was we asked, would you be willing to change your farming practice to meet changing consumer preferences? And this was in view of what they'd just seen about the rise in plant-based diets. And we were quite shocked that 80% of farmers and crofters said yes to that. They said, yeah, well, they're the customer. And so that was really encouraging, because, people ask, well, what can we do as vegans? What we can do is get more people to go vegan, because farmers realize that they have to supply what is in demand. And if animal products are no longer in demand, there's no point in supplying them. The final statistic that, was really shocking to me, and I really, really loved, is based on the fact that, Scotland's quite unique in that 86% of our farmland in Scotland is classed as less favoured areas, and 8% of it is permanently under grass. So, you hear a lot of talk about shifting to plant-based diets, growing plant proteins. Most of Scotland can't do any of that. We can't grow anything at all other than grass because of short growing season, the soils, the topography in general. So we asked the question, on areas of your farm that are rough grazing or permanent pasture and providing financial support was in place, would you be willing to shift out of livestock farming entirely into farming carbon capture by helping the native ecosystem to restore? Then we held our breath. And 64% of farmers and crofters answered yes or maybe to that question. So that was truly shocking. And we had farmers say, yeah, I'd happily have no beasts at all. Beasts are what they call sheep and cows in Scotland. And another farmer who'd been farming for a really long time said, of course, if they pay us what they pay us to take care of the cows, of course I'd give it up. So all of these statistics were really encouraging and shocking. To answer your question, why are more farmers not doing it? It's money, and it's the constraints of our present subsidy system. These two things, because what was repeated throughout the survey was, yes, I will, if financial support is in place. And currently in Scotland, if you live in a less favoured area, if you're more than 50% of your farm is in payment region 2 or 3, you won't get any subsidies unless you have livestock. So, farmers and crofters are really trapped by this system. I think I've gone on long enough. Sorry. Did I answer the question?
Thank you so much for that insight. It's so
That's
brilliant to have that knowledge. And yeah, it's great. Like, I'll add a link in the comments there, folks, so you can go over to Stock Free Farming and find the report on there, because it is fascinating reading.
Absolutely. It was fascinating and very heartening as well. And as you mentioned, Rebecca, with the survey being centered around the UK and in Scotland and British farming systems, is there anything else to add from our American counterparts, TJ and Emma?
Yeah, I can speak a little bit to, I agree with everything Rebecca said. I think that working with specifically dairy farmers, I see a little bit of different barriers than, say, the chicken or the hog industry in the United States, where it might be more contracts that are holding farmers back, is how do I get out of my contract? But with dairy farmers, personally, in my experience, I do see a lot of resistance to change because of the deep culture involved in dairy farming. It's a family legacy for many farmers. They saw their father milk the cows, they saw their grandfather milk the cows, and that land and those animals have been passed down from generation to generation. And so there's a lot of pride in working in the industry. And then that is, entirely valid. If you think about all the pride that you would have from continuing a family business that has remained strong throughout many years, it's a big step to try to break that. And so, and do something else. And it can feel a lot like you're failing, or you're letting your parents down. So I do interact with a lot of cultural barriers, and those are really hard to overcome. It's a lot of talking through them, walking through them, asking probing questions, and even with with a family and neighbors, it extends to the neighbors too. I hear a lot of responses of, oh, I'd be interested in transitioning, but only if my neighbor does it, or the guy down the road. If we're in it together, we could do it together. And I would say, repeating what Rebecca said, a big way to overcome that and just kind of push past all the cultural barriers is a financial incentive, a very strong financial incentive. And and I'll pass it to GJ to add anything.
So I agree with what Rebecca and Emma have stated. So, the financial incentive is extremely important. And another thing that we have to think about is the identity that's attached. That's what Emma was saying, the identity that's attached to, farming. And, I'm a fifth generation farmer myself. And, there's history and heritage and legacy in our farm that I'm really proud of, that I want to, pass to my kids and my children. But, we have to consider those things, but some of the barriers. But most farmers are willing to change. If you think about the way agriculture is here in the United States, most farmers make decisions on what they're going to plant, a year ahead of time, based on prices, and they try to lock in those prices, as quickly as they can, and then they start that process. And so it's like you're making a decision a year ahead of time, down the road, based on current prices that are projected. And so the financial piece is very, very important. But I've noticed that in my work that farmers are extremely willing to have the conversation about transitioning, as long as we can prove that this is going to have some sort of guaranteed income that they can rely on.
Brilliant. Yeah. Well, that leads very well into our next question anyway, but yeah, it's great to have that insight. And I can see folks tuning in now. For anyone who's watching this live right now, if you've had any sort of other arguments come up from farmers when you've been advocating, feel free to put them in the comments. We'd love to see them and hear them. But during our research for this panel, it was fascinating to learn more about the many reasons to switch from animal-based systems to plant-based systems. Even aside from the obvious animal ethics. An example Rebecca gave during a Healthification podcast, which is a great podcast, well worth listening to, was how one couple successfully transitioned using 1 acre of land to produce, I think it was 150 or 350 veggie boxes a week to feed people, as opposed to that same amount of land only being able to support half of a cow. In order to arm our viewers with some facts for the future of farming conversation, I'd love to hear from each of you. What are some of your favorite facts and statistics when it comes to farmers making that switch, of how it benefits them, freeing animals from their business model? So is there anybody in particular who'd like to start us off on that?
Well, I'll jump in, I guess. One of my favorite ones that I read recently was that plant proteins use 150 times less land and emit 70 times less greenhouse gases than the equivalent amount of beef. And I think that's a very compelling statistic. There's lots of compelling statistics, but I think also in answer to the second part, what do farmers gain? I think they gain so much in terms of peace of mind and personal well-being and less trauma. I've been thinking about this a lot lately. My day job, by the way, I'm a trauma therapist, so I do think about this a lot. But I've seen videos online lately of farming families where they have children who are maybe in 4-H or young farmers, and the children are given a lamb or a calf, and they care for this animal up until it goes to slaughter, and how parents praise the child for being able to do that, and for not breaking down, for not changing their mind about sending the animal off. And I think, oh my gosh, what emotions are we suppressing? What emotions do these children have to suppress? Sadness, grief, loss, separation, guilt, whatever it is, that these emotions are suppressed. And we know that when we suppress emotions, it can come out as depression, anxiety, addiction, many, many different things, difficulties with relationships. And, there's a statistic in the UK, and it's this, that more than one farmer a week commits suicide in the UK. I mean, that's horrific. And I wonder if there's a relationship between this. And we did hear on the survey, and one farmer who we've worked with came to us because of this crisis of conscience, basically saying, I just cannot do this anymore. And so I think when farmers let go of livestock, there has to be a sense of peace of mind and clarity and freedom from doing something that has been this morally conflicting for them. And I read a study in the Netherlands that said this feeling of being morally conflicted. It was a farmer who said this. He said, this is growing and it's worldwide. More and more farmers are feeling conflicted about taking care of animals that are then going to be killed for food. But we can't say it because to say it is high treason, which kind of connects with what Emma was saying, that, there's a bit of a conspiracy of silence. And I think when one or two or more farmers begin to break that silence, it frees up other people. I think there's so much personally to gain, from taking that step, kind of like we all gained when we became vegan, but on a different level. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like I know for myself, taking the violence off my plate, even though not being a farmer, it lifted me so much as well. And it makes me think as well about we're seeing a lot more now about men's mental health and this whole repression of speaking and being open about it. And how all these campaigns now is all about getting people to talk. Well, we need farmers to talk too. And so
exactly, as some of you may know, I've worked in the dairy industry over here for many years, and the pressure that people are under, you can't underestimate that. And back then, that was before that. When I began my time in the industry, farming, it was the golden years of dairy farming. We were feeding the world, we were providing essential nutrition, and climate change wasn't really a thing back then. So we were the good guys. Apart from the obvious animal ethics side of things, farmers were being lifted up. Now, the world is waking up. The damage of animal ag is just everywhere. And they're being painted as the bad guys for, ruining the environment, for doing all this stuff to animals. And so that, on top of the pressure that I already witnessed in those years, that must feel like for a lot of them, things are just crashing down. It must be, there must be some empathy for farmers.
Mm-hmm.
TJ, Emma, did either of you want to weigh in on this too?
Well, yeah, no, I was gonna, agree with Rebecca, and also, when it comes to growing plants. So I'm an agronomist, so I love plants anyway. And so when it comes to growing plants, certain plants, I mean, you harvest very quickly. Therefore, you have a quicker margin for profit as it relates to plants. So, there, some. If we're thinking about, squash is here where I am. I'm in the southern United States. Some varieties of squash, you can have a bountiful harvest in 39 to 42 days. And so if you consider that, that amount of harvest potential and efficiency, you can quite, make quite a bit of money, in a short amount of time without the added pressures of, dealing with animals, and because you care for plants a lot differently. And, there's a lot of things when it comes to growing plants that you are able to just kind of relax a little bit, and so I try to have, any of my growers, grow produce, because it's the profit margin is a lot higher. The demand will always be there. And, as you create a superior product, I mean, people enjoy high quality things. And so why not help them, experience it on their plate?
Brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah, I would piggyback off that and say one thing that I find really compelling about the farm transition movement is, as we've seen trending over the years, there's a lot less people who want to work in agriculture. And for the statistic, and perchance it says, the percentage of people has dropped from 44% across the world in 1991 to 26% in 2020. And I've seen this when I speak to farmers, as I ask who's in charge of the farm. The usually man says me. It's an older man. And I say, is there anyone else involved in the business? Is there any kids involved? They usually say, oh, they're off in the city doing a tech job, whatever. I'm in California, so tech is big in the cities. And what I've seen as very compelling, more of an anecdote, is when I've asked the the son or the child standing next to the father, hey, are you interested? Would you be more interested in taking over the farm if it was plants rather than animals, if you're maintaining plants? And the answer is yes, of course, because there's way less interest in managing a whole herd of animals, milking cows 2 to 3 times a day, every day, 365 days a year. And just what TJ was saying and what Rebecca was saying, it's a lot less work and it can be a lot more healing to work with plants. And I think that is just very interesting and piques my personal history a lot, because I've been in the ag industry and I see how hard it is to farm. And so if we can bring the fun back and the enrichment back in farming, rather than, working with animals, but growing something, nurturing something into something that you can consume right from the ground, I think that that's really powerful. And so hopefully it'll bring some young people back in the rural areas and onto the farm.
Yeah, it's brilliant. I can't help but think, all those kids going off to the city to work, they've probably all got their house plants up there, really loving, nurturing and growing, as well. So yeah, we know all too well how much joy there is in having something burst into life in your living room and stuff. And
absolutely, it puts me in mind actually of Justin Reineck. He's a Canadian former pig farmer who now grows plants and is working on being completely self-sufficient. And he said the difference in working in a hog shed where you're cutting off piglets' tails and cutting their teeth without any anesthetic, and the environment of being in a shed like that compared to being out in the open and just among the peace and growing the plants and seeing the fruits of your labor just growing up out of the ground, and be able to look at it all and be like, I did this, I made this happen. This is, I can't imagine the amazing feeling that must be. But having talked on the reasons why farmers are not moving away and also why they should be moving away, I was really happy to learn about a resource that both Emma and TJ have collaborated on, the Farmer Toolkit. This fantastic platform helps farmers with transitions via linking them to funding sources. Well, we all know how much they need that. They've said it. Providing education and training programs, and also access to regional or national opportunities. Would either one of you like to speak on this resource in more depth and why it was important for you to provide such a service in the first place?
Yeah, I'll start, and then Emma, she can interject and as she sees fit. So the Farmer Toolkit is a resource that it's a collaborative resource between Animal Outlook, Miyoko's, and Mercy for Animals. And it really, it's like when you start anything, where do I start? If you're going to start working out, okay, well, where do I start? How do I start? What exercises do I do? What goals do I have? We found that especially in the farming community, the main question is, where do I start and how do I start? Can I get some information about this? And the Farmer Toolkit is really just it's a whole bunch of resources where people who are interested in transitioning can find those resources. I mean, there are financial resources, places where you can find funding. Emma and I collaborated on specifically within the toolkit as far as the mental health resources for farmers, because we know that farming is stressful. I mean, that's just how it is. It's a very stressful industry. Where I am specifically, there's a lot of research going into, drug abuse when it comes to farmers specifically, and how it's really high. And the toolkit is really a roadmap to say, if this is how we get started. These are the questions that farmers are asking, and these are resources, how to grow guides and economic models, things of that nature that really are going to help animal producers start that process of removing themselves.
Yep. TJ hit it right on the head. I would say it came out of a sense of looking at what existing materials there were for any farmer to explore what it would be to go from one operation to a completely different operation. We realized there are some resources, but they are not collected in one space. And so what we thought is, since there's such great existing materials, and since farmers, when they want to learn about something, they either turn to their neighbor or maybe they'll look on the USDA website, depending on, how they're feeling. We thought, let's just bring it all together in one place where farmers can learn and read, and we'll keep adding and changing the toolkit as we see what farmers are more interested in learning and what they might need. But just a starting place for farmers to learn more about the movement and come in contact with any of us as well, because we offer that more hands-on, tailored approach on the ground level. And so if farmers are interested in that more collaborative approach, then easy access to us as well.
Brilliant. Well, I've put the link to it in the comments for this, folks. So I do really encourage our advocates and our viewers there to go check it out as well, because it is fascinating to learn more about this, and we can be better advocates if we're more clued up on it too. Because I think many of us who've had discussion with farmers, they'll start bouncing off with all these objections to what they can do, and if we have some information, we've got our better footing for that anyway. So yeah, please do check it out, folks. Links in the comments there. But a topic that often gets brought up on this channel is, how do we create a vegan world? By me making a personal decision to go vegan, the world around me magically doesn't just go poof, 100% vegan because I'm vegan now. There's so many things that we have to actively work on to get to that point. One such thing is our economy. And as we've already discussed, financial uncertainty comes up a lot when talking to farmers about making a change. So thankfully, the Dairy Farm Transition Initiative is doing brilliant work in building a vegan economy through creating collaboration between farmers in the program and Miyoko's Creamery. I just want to put a side note right here. In New Zealand, I still haven't yet had Miyoko's. I've been told about it all the time.
It's quite heartbreaking, frankly, that we can't get Miyoko's.
I am jealous of you, audience members out there who have had it. I am jealous of you right now. But anyway, there's a brilliant collaboration going on there between the farmers and Miyoko's. So I'd love it, Emma, if you could share a little bit about this exciting initiative and how it benefits both parties.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully we'll get some product to you soon. Yeah, we at Miyoko's, I'm really lucky to work for a company that realizes and acknowledges the corporate responsibility we have in terms of doing the right thing. And so, in particular, we have a responsibility and an ability to choose who and how we source our ingredients. And when you look at the plant-based industry, the PBFA, the Plant-Based Food Association, has done some really interesting research here. They have found that most ingredients used in plant-based foods are sourced from outside the United States by plant-based food companies, including soy, yellow peas, chickpeas, wheat, etc. Even though those ingredients are grown domestically, a lot of that goes to feeding livestock. We realized we feed right into this as Miyoko's. We source ingredients from international sources that we actually could shift and source domestically. And that, doing that is a huge market shift for farmers and incentive for farmers. And we recognize that we could work on the ground level with farmers to bring opportunities, particularly to dairy farmers, to transition and be a part of the emerging plant-based food economy. And PBFA is doing some really great work on domestic farming as well, but it's really rare to find a food company that works directly with farmers because there's so many people in between. When a farmer grows soy, for example, that does not go directly to the food company. It doesn't leave the farm gate and go to the manufacturing facility. It has to be processed and cleaned and stored. It travels from left to right, up and down. And so it's been really interesting to dive into this space and figure out how we can streamline our supply chain to actually work with farmers and bring those financial benefits to the farmers instead of to the middle people. It's been messy and complicated, and TJ has been along for the ride with us. But it's been really powerful and exciting to see how farmers get excited by this new emerging economy. They recognize that it's happening. Even dairy farmers, I think there's been a big disconnect in terms of who's to blame for farmers facing some financial distress. And a lot of it is put on the vegan movement. But to see a food company step up and say, we want to work with you and actually be on the farm level, sitting and talking to farmers means a lot. And so we hope to encourage that by doing that and creating a roadmap for other companies to follow in suit and start working with farmers directly.
That's awesome. Yes, I can imagine the media, should I say, alone in the dairy industry would have us think that, Miyoko's and farmers should be sworn enemies, but it's, quite the contrary. You're trying to help. And this shows, how working together just makes both parties stronger. I remember seeing an interview with Miyoko a while back when she was saying, we need farmers to grow more peas. There is going to be a shortage of peas for pea protein. We need more peas. So the demand is there.
I think everyone around the world also gets that whole that rhetoric of, like support local and all that stuff. And, we can finally do that. And as a love-based movement, as a compassion-based movement, we need to be reaching out and making that connection so that we can support each other for that brighter future. And I really hope our advocates here are seeing that if we work together, that's how we're going to get to a much better world for all of us.
Absolutely. It's great that you guys have been collaborating over in the US and getting such awesome results. It's really encouraging. An important detail that member of our audience, and I have to admit, me myself may be pondering, is how do we attract farmers to these programs in the first place? Rebecca, you've mentioned using video with great success, in prior to having those conversations, and offering them 10 quid as well in advance is a great way to break the ice. But I must ask though, is the V word, vegan, is it banned in each of your outreach sources and websites in order to avoid the presumed sort of prejudice from the farming communities? Is that a conscious move?
I would say it's probably different for each of us. I have gone back and forth on it and made mistakes and rectified those mistakes, but I don't even really know the answer now. I would say we want to be transparent about who we are, right? I come from a vegan cheese company. We make vegan products, and I never want to hide that and mislead anyone. At the same time, I don't think the word vegan should have quite the stigma that it does have for farmers, and we need to share more knowledge so that farmers realize we aren't to blame for the downfall of many of these industries. And so we take a two-pronged approach. We try to be as transparent as possible and say, here's who's backing this initiative, but at the same time, here's why we're doing it. And that's a very genuine reason, is we want to engage you guys and help you all in making the shift.
Yeah.
I would say I am much more in my work. I tend to stay away from any vegan talk at all, because most farmers already have a conceptualization of that in their minds. And I come up with the mindset is, I don't have time to to change your minds in that manner, because most people really don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And so when I go and say, hey, I'm a farmer myself, I come from a farm background, this is the proof of what we're trying to do, I get more support that way, as opposed to saying, hey, we don't need to be enemies, because that comes a little later. And so I lean more forward from the farm perspective. Hey, from your farm longevity, farm sustainability, farm diversity, diversifying income, just the ecosystem perspective. That's the perspective that I come from. And we'll talk about the other stuff a little later, because, and I think even most farmers that I come across, they aren't vegan. They've never considered becoming vegan, but they realize that, hey, they're in a system that exploits them, that it doesn't feel well. And so it's almost like there's a common goal, and they are more than happy to help meet that common goal based on some of the things that we said about, demand and sourcing domestically. They are more than willing to do that. And so for me, I've realized that, taking the long approach from the farm standpoint, farm health, farm longevity, that's been extremely successful for me.
Yeah, I would agree with TJ in that we were quite careful with the website that we kept the word vegan off there, and our name is stock-free farming, so it's not. I think the word vegan is in the website in several places, but it's not. It's not how we advertise. We've always gone with stock-free, and I was surprised when I did the survey of all the farmers I surveyed. Only one said to me halfway through the conversation, he said, "Are you a vegan?" I'm like, "Yeah." And then he made some kind of joke. I don't remember what it was. And then we just carried on, and it was fine. But I was surprised that others didn't ask me that question because it was stock free. So yeah, there's this huge polarity, isn't there, between farmers and vegans? It's stoked by the media. And I'm sure if any of us have been on TV, the BBC over here are bad for, stoking it up and creating these two sides. And to be fair, I've heard vegans say horrible things about farmers, and I think sometimes vegans, in their enthusiasm, make things worse. They say things about farmers that really are distressing to farmers. And the Farmers Weekly magazine over here has labeled vegans as terrorists because some vegans have gone on farms and disrupted the work and been hostile. And so I think we have to tread super carefully. And we've got to somehow bridge that gap. And maybe what TJ's saying, we go in there and we can offer them, markets, or we can offer them financial support, or we can offer them, advice, information. Then that goes a long way. That we have to come alongside them and work with them.
Absolutely. If you don't mind, I'll jump in on that and just add that Rebecca is absolutely right about repairing those relationships, because I've had stories shared with me about how vegans have tried to drive in front of farmers with a livestock trailer and they've had to slam on the brakes and all the livestock slam against the walls. They don't realize that their actions, when you're a vegan and you're like, oh, see a livestock trailer, you get emotional and frustrated. But the solution in my eyes is not to cut that trailer off. And so things like that give our movement a really bad rap, and understandably so. And once that happens, it's really hard to repair those relationships, because you're making people feel a certain way about their whole livelihood and their whole way of operating, when maybe they never even thought about doing something else and it really wasn't their decision what they ended up in. So I agree with Rebecca. I think we need holistically to engage a lot more in a certain way that's friendlier and compassionate, like just what we're all about.
Absolutely. Yeah. Having been a farmer and now vegan and an activist, which I never thought I was going to be, the one thing I say to people, and I love, you guys have as much insight into what it's like to be a farmer. TJ is a farmer, as anyone. But I sort of say to vegans again and again, you absolutely cannot begin to understand what it is like to be a farmer unless you have been a farmer, and so people like you are bridging this gap. And I think you've worked with enough farmers to get a pretty good understanding. But for a lot of people, like I said before, you've just got to have that empathy because you don't know unless you've been there.
Yeah. And here at Vegan FTA, we're all about getting our advocates and our activists to be as effective as possible. And so we encourage people to explore a range of tactics, but also we need people to analyze the tactics that they're using. And so as Emma was saying, some of those tactics, like driving in front of them, it's not effective. So maybe that's something we shouldn't be doing. We should
effective in pissing them off. It's about
And one thing that we've had come up a lot lately is when we're reviewing our strategies, is be like, well, have we achieved our goals yet by continuing in this method? No. Well, what's the harm in trying something different? And so what's happening now with this brilliant panel here is that we're trying to shift towards a more compassionate, more aligned method of activism with these folks to build a better future, rather than doing what we've been doing for years, which is having that hatred, that anger towards farmers and getting nowhere. If we try reaching out this olive branch, then, if it doesn't work, well, we haven't lost anything. But I have a very, very good feeling that this is the way forward, and it's tactics that we need to explore. If we want to be a love-based, compassionate movement, we need to have that compassion for all animals, non-human and human. And so, I really do encourage everyone to analyze what they're doing, emotion can drive us in our advocacy work, but we also have to understand why we're feeling that emotion and how to act with it. If we just go blindly, some great things can happen, but also a lot of bad things can happen. So please be vigilant, folks, of how we're conducting ourselves for the better.
And as Emma said, we don't know how they all ended up doing what they were doing in the first place. I never expected to be milking cows. And a lot of people don't want to be, like you say, taking over that family business. So we don't know, how people ended up in these situations.
I know we've touched on it briefly so far in the conversation, but so how do you guys find the farmers to actually transition? How keen and receptive are they when you first approach them? Is it more of a case of you've just got to let them approach you to find an actual transition farm? Anybody like to weigh in?
I would say, from our point of view, we decided to go to the farmers rather than wait for the farmers to come to us. And one of the purposes of the survey was to connect with farmers who potentially were interested in change. And through the survey, we found these farmers, and 63% of the farmers that we surveyed asked for more information about the changes that were outlined in the survey. So that's our in, isn't it? And I know we're going to talk about this later, but currently we're doing a webinar series, informational series of mostly for farmers, by farmers, to supply them with that information. So I think the survey was just such a great tool to connect with farmers and to get their interest in what we were doing. Some farmers have directly looked up stock-free farming. They found us on the website. They've asked questions, asked for more information, asked for transition plans, and we designed those for them. We do have a stock-free advisory team. We've got some sort of very fortunate to have some world-renowned people on the stock-free advisory team, so we're equipped to answer these questions. But no, I would say the survey, don't wait for farmers to come. You've got to go out and meet them. And I'm thankful that I do have a farming background. I worked on farms, and that gives me a bit of courage, I should say, to approach them and to know, as Jackie was just saying, that everybody's different and everybody's come to this in different ways. And some farmers might not like what they do. And that came out in the survey too. Farmers said, I hate it. I hate it when the lambs go to slaughter. So you never know where people are coming from.
I would say with farmers, word travels fast, and especially within the farming community. And so with my work, my background is also university faculty, and so a lot of my extension efforts and working in precision ag and vegetable production, a lot of people know me from there as in addition to my farm background with our family. And so they word travels fast. Hey, TJ's doing something different now. He's doing this. And like I said, everybody is open for a conversation, and and this type of work is exciting. And I get to collaborate with a lot of cool people like Emma, and we get to put our brains together and make some really, really cool headway. And and I think I think farmers, they enjoy being on the cutting edges of stuff, being on the visible side of farming, because much of farming is sometimes a lot of perception, how people view farming a certain way, people view farmers a certain way. And when they realize that, hey, farmers are businessmen and women, and farmers are they're intellectual people, farmers, they're innovators. I think being able to tell that side of the story with farm transition work, you do get a lot of farmers coming to you. But also just, with background, like Rebecca was saying, with her background in farming, you learn how to approach farmers, and you learn how to speak their language, because they talk a different language than most people talk.
They sure do.
Absolutely. I agree. We've taken a very grassroots approach, and I've taken a trip to Wisconsin, a trip to Maine, and just drove around and stopped by some farms and said, how are you doing? And they say, you mean personally or with the business? Both, just as my mom likes to say, you kick the dirt, you stand and you kick the dirt a little bit and just learn about what makes them tick, why they're interested in farming, and see what kind of common ground to make their operations and their life better or improve. And so that's kind of our approach, as just Rebecca and TJ said.
Brilliant, yeah. Well, I'll be interested to know from our audience, if they have any farming background. I know even I've had a small amount working on sheep farms and stuff too. And if we all have that it's brilliant to use that unique aspect to start that conversation. But as Vegan FTA, we are an organization with a strong emphasis on creating not just vegans, but activists. For the wonderful folks watching this today who are intrigued by advocating directly to farmers, do you have any recommendations for them to follow when doing so? Is there any sort of rules in which you conduct yourselves to be more effective getting out there? I suppose there's a lot of what we just talked about.
Well, man, I think for me, I always go with the approach of I want to listen a lot more than I do any talking, because I feel that as you build relationships, I feel that life is all about relationships, and things move at the speed of relationships. You go a lot further when you have that relational connection. And so for me personally, that is stemmed from just listening a lot and asking questions. And so there have been times where I've left farmers and they would say, we met an hour and a half, 2 hours. And they say, well, you hadn't told me anything about you. Like, I say, well, next time. But for me, that's exciting because I get to hear about them. I get to hear about, what drives them and their dreams. It's been, someone told me that I'm a dream agent, and I like that because like I want to be able to help them dream, especially when it comes to transitions. And so the one rule for me, and the first one is, I try to do a lot of listening, a whole lot of listening.
What's that approach?
I've found the phrase "tell me more" is really amazing. And what TJ was saying, just trying to understand where they're coming from, listening, asking simple questions, and then helping them dream, because in our world, farming has become about efficiency and production and how much are you yielding per acre. It's so efficiency driven. Rarely, I think, do farmers get to sit down and really dream about what do I want to see in the next 10, 15, 20 years. And that's what we hope to do, is to help them dream and then get them to those dreams. So as much as you can do to understand what their image is and help them get to that more creative side is really effective and wonderful. But I would say no hard, fast rules.
Oh, yeah, I agree with what Emma and TJ said, especially, the bit about listening and asking questions, as if you're a vegan and you want to advocate directly to farmers, I guess my advice is don't. It sounds a bit harsh, but unless you have something to offer them, how are you going to advocate? Unless you can say, look, there's this company that's making insulation panels out of hemp, and they're going to pay £850 a ton for that. And is that something that you might be interested in? Unless you've got something concrete to offer, how are you expecting to advocate? But I would say asking, take advantage of learning opportunities, learn what you can about farming. If you can get to volunteer on a farm, that's a good start. Some experience of actually working on a farm or being around farmers and learning about agriculture and horticulture and growing is probably the best thing you can do if you're starting from scratch. That would be my advice.
Well, that's great advice. Thank you. And, it's human nature anyway, isn't it? People want to know what is in it for me, but there are so many benefits to these transitions and in working towards the food systems of the future, and showing people what is possible through anecdotes of, success stories can be a really powerful tool in our advocacy. And as Emma said, earlier on, people are a lot likely to take that jump and make the switch if someone else that they know is doing it, or that they've heard of a really good, outcome for other people. It'll be brilliant to know some of the success stories that you've had. Stock-free farming, we know, has had some great case studies. Rebecca, would you like to share any of your favorites or ones that you like to reference often? Everybody can share though, but Rebecca, by all means, start off.
Well, I think maybe listeners are familiar with Lawrence Candy's example, and Lawrence is probably listening. Hi, Lawrence. Lawrence came to us about 2 years ago looking to shift from, he'd been a dairy farmer, organic dairy farmer, and a beef farmer, looking to shift to veganic, stock-free organic cereal growing. And we sort of went on this journey together, and my goodness, what a learning experience it's been. 2 years later, the cows are gone. And bit of, I don't know if you've heard this news, guys, but the last of Lawrence's cows went to a sanctuary. His last 38 cows. We're very, very fortunate that a benefactor, and he said it's okay to mention his name. His name is Christian Liebel from Project Planet First. And Christian has made it possible to save the remainder of Lawrence's cows. We never expected to do this. The model we sort of had was that Lawrence would gradually wind down the cows. And he did harvest his first veganic wheat and naked oats this past summer. So the plan was he would wind down the livestock, which is, it's a replicable model for other farmers to follow, and gradually build up his stock-free initiatives. But along came Christian and said that I want to save the remainder of the cows, and he's not only bought the cows off Lawrence, but he's paying for them to live out their natural lives at the sanctuary. That's a huge amount of money. I think sometimes vegans have this simplistic idea that farmer stops farming one day, sends the cows to a sanctuary, but you can't do that. You're asking a farmer to give up multiple years' salary. Would you do that? You're asking him to give up his whole living. And so that's not a model that we can advocate for, sadly, but we're going to have to wind down the herd. But, it's been wonderful that the cavalry's come at the last hour for Lawrence. And it's been, I feel emotional talking about it now. And I know it's been very emotional for Lawrence, but his cows are now at Hillside. And very, very thankful to Hillside. And they do amazing work. So that's
wonderful. Fab stuff. And yes, hi Lawrence, I hope you're watching. I've had the pleasure to meet you before as well, and I hope your first harvest went well. It's wonderful everything that you're doing. You're setting such a great example.
But Emma, TJ, did either of you have any big success stories that you use as frequent advocacy tools?
We have been working over the past year with and it's a little bit it's on pause right now, but we've been working with a farm in New York who's been very interested in the movement, and they are a fantastic couple, and just really mapping out what it would be like to transition over many years. As Rebecca said, it takes time. It's not one day you're dairying and the next day you've got a full 10 acres of wheat. So it's a lot of planning. It's a lot of resources in terms of specific models for farmer. Each farmer has a different land, has a different operation. And so it's very resource intensive to think of all of these transition plans, but it is adaptable. And we've been really laying the groundwork on information gathering and mapping what a transition for 100 cows, 300 acres of land would look like, and have some really amazing final findings that are not yet published, but we hope to do that moving forward. And TJ's been pivotal in learning all of this and collecting this information as well.
Yeah, and I would just add that one of the largest successes, part of this is who we're having the conversation with, whether it be food companies, processors, farmers. We're bringing all these people to the table, and we are saying, hey, this is how we achieve this. And the amount of buy-in, the amount of people that are willing to say, hey, we're willing to support this by this. I've had some individual that Emma introduced me to drop some architectural renderings for poultry house conversion to various greenhouses. And so the actual conversations that we're having with with players in this arena I think is monumental.
Fantastic. I've been hearing stories of it. I mean, look at all the bans that farmers have for starters. I've heard of people, I think it was you in an interview, Rebecca, was saying about, you can make money from storage in those barns. There are so many things that you can do with that amount of space.
Yeah, ecotourism, there's growing mushrooms in containers, all sorts of wonderful things happening. And so, yeah, it's a very exciting area to be in. But to speak about anecdotes and success stories, we would be remiss if we did not mention Stock-Free Farming's Beyond the Possible new webinar series, a series by farmers for farmers. Rebecca, would you care to briefly tell us about this event and how our viewers can get involved with it?
Yeah, that was the one I mentioned earlier, that it's based on the farmers that we surveyed, their demand for more information, they're asking for more information. So the webinar features a diversity of growers and experts. We're having a workshop coming up next week on hemp. We've got people in very remote marginal areas, actually a farmer coming up from Orkney who is going to speak on growing in marginal areas where there's a lot of barriers due to the weather and the wind. We've featured the Scottish bean, so lots of different options, and you can watch it. It's stockfreefarming.org/beyond-the-possible. And the webinars started on November 1st and they're going to run through December 6th. But if you've missed any, all the recordings are up there already at that link, stockfreefarming.org/beyond-the-possible. Yeah, and it's been great. We've had good attendance at the webinars, lots of interesting questions. These are not vegans who are presenting. Maybe half the people are vegans and others are not, but they're all presenting stock-free growing options. So that's really exciting.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And talking that different language that the farmers understand that TJ was talking about. And I was really excited to see Ian Tolhurst. He's actually with us today. Hi, Ian Tully. I don't know if anyone else out there has been reading Regenesis. Absolutely amazing book, and see Tully in there. I saw his name pop up and I was a bit starstruck there for a minute. So wonderful to have you with us, Ian.
But yeah, the link to this series is in the comments once again. And so, yeah, we need to learn from folks within this industry so then we can help them in bringing it, bringing it to a non-animal based system and a plant-based system, which is better for all of us. It's just been so insightful throughout all of this. And I know we have to wrap up for the hour this time round, but I would love to hear from our brilliant speakers today how we can best support each of you. And if they'd like to get involved in this form of advocacy, is there anywhere we can be sending them to? So, yeah, maybe Rebecca, would you like to tell us where we can send folks to help support your work?
Well, the website is stockfreefarming.org. We have a newsletter. You can join us, and if you click the join button, you'll get our newsletters, which are sort of irregular, but we do newsletters with our latest news in it. If you're listening and you're extremely wealthy, there's a donate button on there too, which we're always grateful for anything that comes our way. Yeah, I think those are probably the main ways you can support us right now, and spreading the word. If you do talk to a farmer, just to pass on the website, let them know there's other possibilities out there.
Brilliant. Well, Emma, do you want to go next?
Sure, yeah. Our website is dairyfarmtransition.com. You can also contact us through miokos.com, and we have a contact us button on both websites. Happy to connect more. And the Farmer Toolkit is another way if you want to show your allyship there with our three organizations. I would say the key is to, as Rebecca said, get out there and speak to farmers, get some farming experience, understand what it's like, try to put yourself in their shoes, and really great things can come from that, I think, all around, especially if you enter with an open mind. But happy to chat more one-on-one.
Brilliant. Well, last and by far not least, TJ, where can we go to support you?
Yeah, you can go to animaloutlook.org and you can find out more about what we do. We do investigations, legal advocacy, and you can find out more about the outreach that we do and specifically, farm transitions. And so you can, that's a great way to get involved. You can sign up for our newsletter, and you can reach out directly to me because, what we are, what I do is part of a larger movement because, like I said, I work closely with Emma a lot. And so if anyone has, specific talents, if they're a graphic designer, we're looking for graphic designers to help, rebrand farms as they transition. So if you have any skills that you would like to lend, just let us know.
Brilliant.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for all your insight, your advice, brilliant tips. And thank you for all the work that you're doing to help create change. We need and appreciate people like you so much in our movement.
Yeah, and I hope the audience have learned as much as we have. Like we've had quite a lot of insight, but today even I've been learning even more. I'm really excited. I feel like this has given me more tools to be able to advocate better and hopefully build that brighter future. So I can't thank you enough for joining us. I can't thank all the guests and the audience, especially as well for tuning in today. Whether you're here live or whether you're watching the replay, please share this. Please follow all the links in the comments there. Get support these folks. Get out there and be active. And yeah, let's start building this world compassionately, love-based, and help everyone out.
And get so much more great food.
Yeah, so much
and
more
grow
great
some more
food.
peas from Miyoko so they can send some to New Zealand.
Yes, Miyoko, New Zealand. Let's make this happen.
Yes, we're on it. Thank you both so much for this opportunity and for gathering us together. It's been really great.
Yeah.
Yes,
Thanks,
it's been a lot of
guys.
fun. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you all. Well, stay tuned to Vegan FTA and make sure you're following for more future updates from all these fine folks here and the future of farming. So thank you for tuning in.
Enjoy your day wherever you are.